Hello, Wajay. Welcome to another of our WSR live streaming event focused on the Webequie Supply Road project. Today we're going to talk about the Webequie Supply Road projects, components, and activities. And the purpose of this series of live streaming is to help community members and others better understand the project as it moves forward through the environmental assessment process. Today, joining me is my co-host, Don Parkinson, SNC Lavalин's engagement lead for the Webequie Supply Road project. How are you doing today, Don?
Pretty good, thanks, Mike. How's it going?
Excellent.
You're at
I'm here in the studio. And
running the desk. You're running the desk
yeah,
today, Mike. Yeah.
maybe in the near future you'll join me here, and we'll co-host this right from the studio as well.
Yeah, it's much better. It's much better when we're both at the desk, I think.
Right.
Mike, maybe just to get things, kick things off, we should probably remind our viewers exactly what the project is and what it isn't. Do you think you could take us through this a bit?
Yeah, maybe for our viewers, we do have a call, text and number. They can text a question or a comment on the following number: 844-424-0500. Again, 844-424-0500. I think they'll in the ribbon stream they'll lay out the number there later. And you can also follow us on social media. Hashtag at WFN Supply Road. Again, WFN Supply Road. And you can follow us on the website. The website has a lot of information, has fact sheets, newsletters, EA video tutorials, translated material as well, and even a computer animation of the proposed road construction phases. And there'll be more of that coming soon. So I think you're right. I think what's important, Don, is what isn't the WSR Supply Road. For one thing, it's not an environmental assessment for the proposed Ring of Fire mining development. So we're not doing the environmental assessment for any mines that are being proposed out there. We're also not doing an environmental assessment, again, this is WSR, for a road connecting to the provincial road network. The project footprint actually starts the Webequie's airport and ends at one of the proposed mine site. And you can find the map on the actual website as well for those that are curious. The actual road and the supply road really is connecting Webequie to the future Ring of Fire developments. And I think the purpose. Well, the primary purpose of the supply road is to allow Webequie First Nations to benefit from the opportunities associated with the planning, the development, and the operations of any mines in the future that may be developed in the area, as well as mineral exploration activities that are currently happening. So that's the purpose of the WSR project. And
Maybe, Mike, I can remind our viewers a little bit about where the project's actually located.
yes, good idea.
The project is located in northwestern Ontario. It's about 600 kilometers northeast of Thunder Bay, and Webequie First Nation is surrounded by many other First Nations. And the road itself runs southeast from the airport in Webequie down to McFalls Lake. So you'll get an idea of where it is. Webequie is about 200 to 300 kilometers southwest of Winisk or Pewanak First Nation. And it's about the same distance west of Attawapiskat First Nation, just to sort of help situate everyone. So it's a remote community, and that's why they're looking at this road for some economic development opportunities. And one of the key aspects about this project, and unique aspects about this project, is that it's being led by the actual community itself. So they are what you call the proponent of the environmental assessment. They are the project sponsor, if you will. And in leading the project, the Webequie First Nation is applying their own community sort of derived principles as a foundation and a basis for their relationship and the way they interact or deal with neighboring First Nations and government agencies. And maybe, Mike, you can tell us a bit more about this.
Right. I mean, if the control room can put it on slide 6 of the deck, I can go through a couple of these principles. So what's really important and what's unique about this project is that it's Indigenous led. So Webequie is the proponent of this WSR project, and because they're both the proponent as well as a community with constitutional rights and members that use the road, that they know that the engagement process it will be principled, and out of those principled will be the sort of the guiding posts for the engagement activities, which is really based on the Webequie's First Nations three-tier approach. So if you go to the next slide, Webequie's three-tier approach is really made up of the core tier, like sort of the center tier, which is the community and their overall well-being, their physical health, the mental health, the social health, the education, employment, income, and then the next sort of tier is what they call the relational tier, preserving the Indigenous culture of the community, increasing understanding the culture by others, and language, traditional cultural activities, Indigenous knowledge as well. And then there's the foundational tier. So like the outside area is based on sort of treaties and partnerships. So fair sharing of the benefits from the land with government and industry. So this is sort of the framework from which they're moving forward with any project, not just a WSR, but it's part of their worldview and how they approach the world, with any vision or projects or initiatives. So if you go to the next slide, on slide 8, is the elders' principles. So because it's Indigenous community that's actually the proponent of this Webequie Supply Road, so the principles are sort of unique. So you sort of have, the federal set of principles around engagement and consultation. You got the provincial set of principles for engagement with Indigenous communities. So Webequie came up with their own, talking to the elders within the communities. And so one of them, the first one is the mutual recognition of inherent rights. So they know that they themselves have inherent rights and they know their neighbors have inherent rights. There's a mutual recognition of essential knowledge and knowing that the use, the knowledge that they have through their elders and the transmission through generation is the same one that the other communities have. Traditional knowledge and practices, certain sites, certain land utilization patterns, they themselves have them. They also see that other communities also has traditional knowledge and practices, and also mutual recognition of clan families and relationships. So you'll have other neighboring communities members living in Webequie, also vice versa. So you have Webequie members living in their neighboring communities as well. So they recognize sort of the web of relationships that are in the area, as well as within the communities outside of our surrounding Webequie. And then there's the mutual recognition of sustainable livelihood. So they know that people hunt and trap and fish, and their right to for a livelihood, a sustainable livelihood, and so too they have their same right as well. And then it's sort of the mutual recognition of traditional protocols or protocols of engagement. So each communities will have their own way how they want to be engaged, and so there's a recognition of that as well. So that's basically the sort of the unique approach around the engagement part of this project. Maybe we'll move, Don, to
Yeah,
perhaps maybe the
that's
description of
really
the project.
That's right, Mike. That's really interesting what you covered there. I think that's really important that our viewers understand that this Webequie has defined the foundation of this project in terms of how they want to deal with their neighbors and with government agencies, and that's really important. It's based in what the elders have put together, and I think it's a really notable, I think, part of the project that I think our viewers need to really pay attention to. Um, as you said, Mike, this project isn't just an all-season road. The project itself involves a lot of different components, and if the project team can bring up slide 9, description of the project, that would be great. Look at that. Fantastic project team here. Um, let's talk a little bit about this. The all-season road itself is about 107 kilometers long, according to the preferred route that's been identified and determined by community members, but through their own sort of internal consultation. Um, it would be a 2-lane gravel surface. This road itself. 17 kilometers of the road actually run through the reserve lands. We have here on the screen preliminary corridor width. So what we've done is identified really a road corridor that follows, so the center line of it follows a certain route, and on 1 kilometer on either side of that route that was determined by community members is our road corridor. So within that corridor, we will be positioning the road as things move forward. If the EA is approved, we'll be fine tuning the exact location of the road based on a number of factors, including avoiding environmental constraints, cultural constraints like sacred areas, for example, and trying to like what you call optimize or maximize the the sort of ease, the ability to build the road sort of efficiently. So putting it in higher areas where it's less expensive for construction. So there's a lot of factors involved in that. So we have this 2 kilometer wide sort of area within which we can place the road. And then the actual corridor width, like the cleared area, would be 35 meters. To accommodate the road and some additional space on either side. Of course, the road crosses a number of water uh, water water courses, rivers and creeks, and crosses Winnisk Lake as well to leave the island where the Webequie community is located. Um, so there would be a number of bridges and culverts of different sizes all along the study area. There's 3 major crossings, I believe, at Winnisk Lake, Winniskissis, and then at the Muckatai River as well. And then there are a number of smaller crossings that involve small bridges, but mainly most of the water crossing structures would be culverts. And then another component is what we call aggregate extraction and processing areas. And what that really means is aggregate is the material that you use to build the road. So, like the gravel, for example, different sizes of stone to serve as the base for the road. You need to be able to get that, from a location that's fairly close by in order to be able to build the road at a reasonable cost. You can't fly in aggregate or bring it from hundreds of kilometers away. You have to have it relatively close to where the road actually is. So part of the work on this project has been to identify where these locations would be. So they become part of the project. Some of them are temporary and some of them are permanent. Temporary to help build the road, permanent to be able to maintain the road, to get gravel, for example, to maintain the road if certain areas might get washed out due to high water levels, etc. Then another component of the project would be construction camps. So when you have these workers working on the road, it doesn't make sense for them to drive long distances to get to the work site every day. You need camps so that you can get as much so the road can be built as quickly as possible. And so these camps take up space, and we need to accommodate them as part of the project. and these would, of course, would be temporary. Once construction's done, these areas would be decommissioned or removed. And then another temporary component of the project would be the storage and laydown yards. These are areas where you store materials that you need, materials and equipment that you need to build the road. So these areas would be at different locations depending on how they're phasing the construction, how they're doing the construction work. So that sort of, hopefully that gives people an idea of exactly what the project involves, and the environmental assessment covers all of these components. They're all part of what we call the project. So speaking of projects, Mike, like most big projects, it occurs in phases, and each phase involves different activities. Maybe you can take us through the two main phases and some of the activities that are within each of those phases.
Yeah, so I think it's important right now. We're at the pre-construction phase, so like we're doing a lot of planning and studying, called the environmental assessment, and we'll walk through some of that in the future, in a few moments. But after pre-construction is actually construction. So if this environmental assessment's approved by everybody, including Webequie, then they'll embark on the construction phase, which includes a whole variety of activities within the construction phase. And then later it would be the operation maintenance. So you can see on the screen, sort of the range of activities within the construction phase. So you have field surveys, staking and layout areas. So, you look at like it's a clearing that they actually have to do that are based on the engineering design and the actual routing that was selected for the road. So once the field surveys were done, and then you start clearing it out, and the grubbing of trees and other vegetation, and then the construction of the storage and laydown areas. So you'll see additional footprints, during construction, such as access roads. You might see a construction camp, for the workforce along the routes. You see that, I think, now with the transmission line that's being built with Wate Power. They have different camps, and they're mobile once certain sections are built, and they move further north. And then they have, in this case, would be aggregate extraction areas, where that's be another site where aggregates are being extracted and for the use of the road, as well as the actual construction, but also the waste transport. So things that are not being used, or have to be moved from the site, that's being transported out. And then, of course, there's the handling and storage of fuel for the equipment in the vehicles. You'll see heavy equipment used, as well as other vehicles during the construction phase. And then, of course, there's sort of the storage and the handling and disposal of hazardous and non-hazardous waste, both domestic wastewater and sewage. So part of the camp and other areas where the water is needed, say it's for dust control or what have you, that will be part of the construction. And sometimes there's air and noise emissions from equipment and vehicles. So you'll see sound barriers, mostly in residential or more closer to the cities, where noise barriers are set up around the construction site to reduce any noise levels that are affecting either the human or other animals. And then it's the erosion of exposed soils that has to be done on the construction. So that's the construction. That's just a list you can see. And then there's the operation and maintenance of that. So if you go back to slide 10, you'll see the operation and maintenance list. Then there's, once it's built, and you'll see this, just on the main highways that we all drive on, even on the winter road, someone has to maintain the road. So you'll see graders, and there's a picture of a grader here, flattening out the road or maintaining the road. So that's the same thing with this possible Webequie Supply Road project, that there's visual inspections of the road and structures, road service repairs. So if there's some bumpy areas or what have you, they'll get repaired. Dust control, control of vegetation and brush within the road corridor. So sometimes you'll see in the summer people clearing the right of way because it's either getting too bushy. Road maintenance and snow clearing. So you'll see out there in the wintertime trying to make the roads in a better condition when it comes to snow or ice conditions. Of course, there's the clean out and repairs of culverts and ditches and outfalls. So in areas that have those, you'll see people doing that as well. And then you have sort of the road use controls or management, like road security, the enforcement of the rules, access to and use of nearby lands along the route. There's the vehicle and operating licensing requirements. So if it's going to be a public road or a community use road, there has to be some rules around that road. And with the use of a road, there's insurance coverage requirements and general liability. So this is all part of the planning around the construction, operation, maintenance that has implications for people that may be thinking about using the road, but you got to think through personally about what is it that you need if you're a remote community that wants to use this road and haven't got a license or not registered your vehicle, or even thinking about the insurance requirements for a publicly used or community use road, or whatever rules that be applied to this thing. So that's the different phases and the different activities within those phases. Don?
Thanks for that, Mike. And boy, it sure looks like time is not our friend on this, is it?
Yes.
Well, let's do a quick dive into the project components and activities before we wrap up. If the team can switch to slide 11 for me, please. We'll bring that up on the screen, and I'll run through that and then hand it over to Mike. Okay, so let's talk about some of the activities that have gone on so far or will be going on. One thing that we did very, very early in the project, before the EA even started, was conduct what you call a LiDAR survey. And that involves using a fixed-wing aircraft, an airplane, small airplane, with sensors on board hanging off the wings that send laser signals down. And then depending on how long it takes for the signals to come back, that helps identify the height of the land. So it allows us to get a very sort of detailed, high-resolution picture of the height of the land through the study area in a really sort of efficient, fast way. And then we can use that information to sort of understand things like the drainage patterns, like how the water drains over the land, which helps us understand how to design the road. It just helps us in a lot of different ways. Road design in terms of identifying areas where the road might be steep, and maybe you can avoid those areas so the road isn't as steep and unsafe. So you gather a lot of information from that. Another survey that we conducted earlier in this project was a ground penetrating radar system, which we used to help identify the thickness of the peat layer through the muskeg areas, through the areas, the James Bay lowland areas that the project runs through, because the thicker it is, the harder it is to build the road through those areas. So those were a couple of the field surveys that have been done earlier. If the EA is approved, one of the early activities would be clear and grub trees and vegetation to clear the area to start the work in those areas. And then, of course, as Mike talked about, the construction or I talked about, I guess, about the construction of some of the supportive infrastructure, like the storage and laydown yards and access roads and construction camps. And I think, Mike, I'll pass the baton over to you to talk about some of the other components and activities.
Yeah, so I think for those that seen road construction in Northern Ontario, you'll see a lot of foundations along the roads. Some cases you'll see these rubber tires that are used, shredded tires as foundations. But a lot of cases you'll also see rocks and aggregates. So there are many uses for aggregates. And so sometimes it's used for the foundations of the rocks, for the road, excuse me, and as well as for the maintenance. So part of the studies we're doing is trying to identify where aggregate sources are for road uses and the foundations, but also for maintenance and operation of the road. So along the road, things are being identified, or aggregate sources are being identified, and some geotechnical work will be done to see what type of rock or aggregate sources are in terms of the grade, and how far along the road from that source to the road, because in that aggregate source will be the need for access roads, smaller roads to access those aggregates, either temporarily or permanently, which ends up being part of the overall project. So aggregates is a big deal for roads of any types. So it's going to be a discussion point in the future with the project team, with communities, that so too look for aggregates. If you the remote airports that are operating in Northern Ontario, the MTO are always looking for aggregate sources to maintain their own airstrips. So road construction, there's earth excavation, grading activities that has to occur, including drainage ditches, permanent culverts and bridges at minor and major water crossings. So once those crossings are identified and studied, and the geotechnical work is done, on the banks of those, see what kind of structure are going to be placed there. And then sort of the cleanup and restoration of the corridor once it's done. Then there's the decommissioning of the temporary infrastructure or supportive infrastructure. So we mentioned about the laydown area, and things that you don't really see when you're using a road that's all completed. But during the construction, there's actually other sites along where they either store material or park the heavy equipment, etc. But they're restored once the actual road is completed. And then if you go to the last slide there, 13, and then there's road operation and maintenance. So of course, roads, if they're used lots, they have to be maintained. If there's some emergency repairs that has to happen, sometimes there's floods or washouts. And then the management of vegetation along on the roads, and then there's the sort of the environmental effects and compliance monitoring that has to happen afterwards. Once the environmental assessment is completed, the construction is completed, it doesn't just stop there. There's actually commitments made in the operations. So I think that takes us to the end of our program, Don.
Yeah, that was a lot of material to cover in a short time, wasn't it, Mike?
Yeah, a lot faster than I thought. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. We continue to do these live streaming sessions for your benefits and our viewers' benefits. And so I think you should keep an eye on our social media, WSR Supply Road, and our website for upcoming shows. And we thank you again for joining us. Miigwech.
Thank you.